Greetings, cozy knights. Lower your swords and rest by the fire. Tonight, we journey through the fascinating world of Skyrim's companions. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what games you'd like to hear about next. And subscribe if this helps you sleep. The Keeper's Secret Dance. Cicero, the jester assassin and keeper of the Night Mother, possesses one of the most unusual behaviors of any follower in Skyrim. Unlike every other companion in the game, Cicero will spontaneously break into dance at completely random moments, regardless of where you are, what you're wearing, or what danger surrounds you. This isn't triggered by any specific event or location. It's simply programmed into his character as a unique quirk that makes him stand out from the dozens of other followers available. You could be deep in a Dwemer ruin, surrounded by Falmer and their Chorus companions, and Cicero will still pause mid-battle to perform a little jig. The animation appears to be tied to his jester personality, reflecting his unhinged mental state and his devotion to the Night Mother. What makes this even more interesting is that this dancing behavior persists even if you equip him with the heaviest Daedric armor in the game. No matter how serious his appearance becomes, that playful, disturbing jester personality bleeds through in these random dance breaks. The immortal jester returns. If you spare Cicero during the Dark Brotherhood questline, specifically during the Cure for Madness, he becomes one of the few truly essential followers in Skyrim, meaning he literally cannot die. However, there's a fascinating twist to his immortality that most players never discover. When Cicero is reanimated using the Dead Thrall spell after being killed in combat, he's the only NPC in the entire game who continues to speak his unique dialogue lines instead of making the generic zombie groans that other reanimated corpses make. Even more bizarrely, when reanimated, he'll automatically re-equip all of his jester clothing, which normally disappears when you loot a dead body. This appears to be an oversight in the game's code, but it creates this surreal experience where you can have an undead Cicero following you around, cracking jokes and commenting on your adventures as if nothing happened. Players have reported that Dead Thrall Cicero will even perform his random dance animations, making for one of the most unsettling yet entertaining follower experiences in the game. The Silent Historian. Mjol the Lioness holds the distinction of being the most talkative follower in all of Skyrim, with more unique dialogue lines than any other companion. She has specific comments programmed for dozens of locations throughout the province, from major cities to obscure caves that most players never discover. When you travel with Mjol, she'll share stories about her past adventures, offer opinions on the political situation in Riften, and provide commentary on nearly every dungeon you explore together. Data miners examining the game files have found that Mjol has dialogue for numerous locations, demonstrating the extensive voice work done for her character. Her talkative nature appears to have been intentional from the developers, as her character was designed to be a walking lawbook, someone who could help immerse players in the world by constantly providing context and backstory. However, this same feature makes her one of the more divisive followers. Some players love the constant narration and the world building, while others find her endless chatter grating, especially during stealth missions where her voice can break immersion. The levelless Khajiit. J'zargo is the only follower in the base game of Skyrim who has no level cap whatsoever, meaning he will continue to grow in power alongside the Dragonborn indefinitely. While most followers max out at level 30, 40 or 50, J'zargo will scale all the way to level 81 in vanilla Skyrim if you reach that point. This makes him potentially the most powerful mage companion in the entire game, as his destruction magic spells become increasingly devastating as his level rises. However, it's worth noting that the unofficial Skyrim patch caps his level at 30, which suggests the developers who created the patch viewed his unlimited scaling as unintended. Despite this change in the unofficial patch, in unmodded Skyrim, J'zargo's unlimited leveling makes him unique among followers. One catch that many players don't realize is that he levels alongside you, meaning if you recruit him at level 10, he'll be level 10, not automatically powerful. The reason for J'zargo's unique scaling in vanilla appears to be an oversight rather than an intentional design choice, which is why the community patch addressed it. Players who discover this fact about vanilla Skyrim often consider J'zargo to be the optimal follower for endgame content, despite his somewhat arrogant personality and tendency to make comments about being the superior mage. The Executioner's Secret, Artar, the Executioner of Solitude who beheads Rogvir at the start of the game, is one of the few followers who is entirely essential, meaning he cannot be killed under any circumstances. What makes Artar particularly interesting is that he's the only Redguard follower available in the base game, and he possesses some of the highest base stats for a warrior class companion. His two-handed weapon skill is exceptional, and he has heavy armor proficiency that rivals even the companions. However, most players never recruit Artar because his quest to become a follower is easy to miss. You need to speak with him immediately after the execution scene, and if you don't, the quest disappears from your journal. Based on his limited dialogue and brief questline, players have speculated that Artar's character was originally meant to have a more substantial role in Solitude's storyline, though there's no confirmed evidence of cut content in the game files. His position as the only Redguard follower and his relatively underdeveloped character arc suggest he may have been compressed during development, but this remains speculation rather than documented fact. The Farmer's Revenge. If you choose to help Laureus, the farmer near Whiterun, report Cicero to the guards during the delayed burial quest, Laureus and his wife will later be found murdered on their farm. This happens automatically after you complete certain Dark Brotherhood quests, and it's Cicero's revenge for the farmer's betrayal. What many players don't realize is that this murder scene is one of the few times in Skyrim where your early game choices have lasting visible consequences much later in the story. The bodies of Laureus and Curwi remain on the farm permanently, serving as a grim reminder of Cicero's ruthlessness and the Dark Brotherhood's reach. Interestingly, if you help Cicero instead of the farmer, Laureus and his wife survive the entire game, going about their farming business peacefully. This creates a subtle moral choice where helping the creepy jester actually saves innocent lives, while helping the seemingly normal farmer leads to their deaths. The whole situation reflects Skyrim's often murky moral landscape, where the right choice isn't always obvious. The arrow economy. Unlike most followers in Skyrim, Cicero actually consumes the arrows you give him for ranged combat, making him one of the few companions who requires regular ammunition restocking. Most followers have an infinite supply of whatever arrows you give them after the first one, but Cicero's code is different. This means you need to check his inventory periodically and replenish his arrow supply, or he'll eventually run out and be unable to use his bow effectively. This quirk makes Cicero slightly more high maintenance than other followers, but it's actually more realistic from a game design perspective. The strange thing is that this arrow consumption applies to Cicero, even though he's primarily a dagger user who rarely pulls out a bow. Players who equip him with expensive enchanted arrows need to be especially careful, as those arrows will slowly disappear from his inventory. Based on how differently Cicero behaves compared to standard followers, this could suggest that his follower code was implemented separately from other companions, though the exact reason for this difference isn't documented in official development notes. The Ghostly Assassin. The Dark Brotherhood Initiates are some of the most powerful followers in Skyrim, but they're also the most generic. These unnamed masked assassins have no personality, no backstory, and limited dialogue. What makes them interesting from a mechanical standpoint is that they're completely essential and cannot die under any circumstances. They also have extremely high combat stats and excel at stealth gameplay. However, their lack of character makes them feel more like combat drones than actual companions. Many players use them for difficult fights specifically because they're immortal and effective, but then dismiss them afterward, because traveling with a faceless, voiceless follower feels empty compared to companions with personality. Interestingly, the Initiates appeared to be placeholder characters that were meant to be replaced with unique followers in the final game, but Bethesda ran out of development time. Evidence for this can be found in unused voice files and character models in the game's data files. The Reluctant Werewolf. Isla the Huntress is one of the few followers who can transform into a werewolf, but she'll never actually do this while following you. Her werewolf transformation is locked to specific questline moments, and once she becomes your companion, she'll only use her archery and melee combat skills. This is somewhat disappointing given that having a werewolf companion could have added interesting combat dynamics. What's even more interesting is that Isla is the only member of the companions who refuses to be cured of lycanthropy. She embraces her werewolf nature and considers it a gift from her scene, rather than a curse. This philosophical difference sets her apart from other Circle members like Farkas and Vilkas, who eventually want to return to their purely human forms. Isla's commitment to lycanthropy extends to her marriage dialogue, where she'll continue to reference hunting and the thrill of the transformation even after becoming the Dragonborn spouse. Her character represents a different perspective on lycanthropy in Skyrim's lore, treating it as a blessing rather than the burden other werewolf characters perceive it to be. The Twice-Hired Mercenary. Stenvar, the Nord mercenary found in Windhelm, is one of the more aggressive followers in terms of combat AI. He'll charge directly at enemies without waiting for you to engage first, which can be both helpful and frustrating depending on your playstyle. If you're a stealth archer trying to pick off enemies from a distance, Stenvar will often ruin your strategy by rushing in with his battle axe. However, his aggressive nature makes him excellent for players who prefer straightforward combat approaches. What's particularly interesting about Stenvar is his unique dialogue during dungeon exploration. He's notably greedy, making comments about treasure and expressing disappointment when you leave valuable items behind. His personality suggests a mercenary who's purely motivated by gold rather than honor or duty, which makes sense given that you literally have to pay him 500 gold to recruit him in the first place. Unlike some other mercenaries who develop loyalty to the Dragonborn over time, Stenvar maintains his mercenary mindset throughout his companionship, constantly reminding you that he's in this relationship for profit. Serana, the vampire daughter of Lord Harkon, is widely considered one of the best followers in Skyrim's Dawnguard DLC, but she has a hidden feature that many players never discover. Serana is programmed to be much more intelligent than most followers when it comes to combat positioning. She'll actively seek cover during range battles, avoid friendly fire better than other companions, and use environmental features to her advantage. This advanced AI makes her feel more like an actual adventuring partner than a simple follower. Additionally, Serana is one of the few followers who can't be dismissed to join the Blades, and she's essential throughout most of the Dawnguard questline, making her effectively immortal for a significant portion of the game. What really sets Serana apart is her extensive dialogue system. She has unique voice lines for hundreds of situations and locations, commenting on everything from the weather to ancient Nordic architecture. Her character development throughout the Dawnguard storyline is more elaborate than most other followers, with her personality and dialogue changing based on the choices you make during the questline. The Broken Oath, Vilkas and Farkas, the twin brothers of the Companions, both have a unique essential status that's tied directly to quest progression. They cannot be killed until after you complete the Companions' questline, at which point they become mortal, like other followers. This creates an interesting dynamic, where these powerful warriors are essentially unkillable bodyguards during your time with the Companions, but become vulnerable afterward. Many players don't realize this change happens and are shocked when one of the brothers dies during a later quest. What makes the twins particularly interesting is their contrasting personalities despite being brothers. Vilkas is the more intellectual and cautious one, while Farkas is straightforward and brutally honest. Their dialogue reflects these differences, with Vilkas offering tactical advice and Farkas making simple, direct observations. However, both brothers share identical combat capabilities as followers, making the choice between them purely a matter of personal preference for their dialogue and personalities, rather than any mechanical difference. The Drunken Master. Eric the Slayer is unique among followers because he starts as a simple farm boy with no combat experience and transforms into a capable warrior through the player's intervention. His recruitment quest involves convincing his father to let him become an adventurer, and after you help him achieve this dream, he becomes available as a follower. What's touching about Eric's story is that he was created as a tribute to a real person. Eric West was a Skyrim fan who passed away before the game's release, and Bethesda honored him by creating this character. The inscription on Eric the Slayer's journal reads, "Eric the Slayer in honor of Eric West," making this one of the more poignant Easter eggs in Skyrim. As a follower, Eric has fairly standard barbarian stats, but what makes him special is his earnest enthusiasm for adventuring. His dialogue reflects his inexperience, but also his genuine excitement about exploring Skyrim. Many players feel protective of Eric because of his backstory and his innocent nature, making his potential death in combat more impactful than other followers. The Invisible Teacher. Many followers in Skyrim double as skill trainers, allowing you to pay them for training and then retrieve your money from their inventory afterward, essentially getting free skill increases. Fendal the Wood Elf is one of the most commonly exploited followers for this trick, as he's both an archery trainer and very easy to recruit early in the game. However, what many players don't realize is that not all follower trainers allow this money retrieval. Some trainers have their gold flagged as essential in their inventory, preventing you from taking it back. This inconsistency seems to be an oversight rather than intentional game design. The most valuable trainer followers are those who teach expensive high-level skills, as you can save massive amounts of gold by using the inventory exploit. Characters like Ayla the Huntress, Archery Expert, and Enjada Stonearm, Block Expert, become incredibly valuable not just as combat companions but as free training resources. However, using this exploit can feel like cheating to some players, as it allows you to max out skills much faster than the developers intended. the suicidal spouse. Lydia, the most famous follower in Skyrim, due to her iconic line, "I am sworn to carry your burdens," has become a meme in the gaming community for her tendency to die in ridiculous ways. Her aggressive combat AI combined with her non-essential status after certain quests means that she'll charge into dangerous situations without regard for her own safety. Many players have stories of Lydia dying to traps, falling off cliffs, or getting overwhelmed by enemies because she rushed ahead. What's interesting is that Lydia was designed to be the player's first housecarl, meaning she's supposed to be a reliable, capable warrior. However, her AI behavior and the point at which most players recruit her, when they're still relatively low level, means she often becomes overwhelmed in combat. The disconnect between her intended role as a loyal protector and her actual behavior as a reckless charger has made her one of the most memorable, if frustrating, followers in the game. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, Lydia remains one of the most popular followers, with countless players reloading saves to keep her alive. The poisonous professor, Brelina Marion, one of the mage followers from the College of Winterhold, has a personal quest that involves experimenting on the player with untested spells. This quest is notable because it's one of the few times a follower actively uses the Dragonborn as a guinea pig for potentially dangerous magic. The spells she accidentally casts on you during her quest can temporarily turn you into various creatures or afflict you with random effects. What makes Brelina interesting as a follower is that she specializes in conjuration and destruction magic, making her effective at both summoning allies and dealing direct damage. However, her relatively low health pool compared to warrior followers means she can be vulnerable in close combat. Her dialogue also reveals an interesting backstory about her family's expectations and her desire to prove herself as a mage, giving her more depth than the many other college followers. After you complete her personal quest, she becomes a marriage candidate, and her dialogue suggests genuine gratitude and affection for the player's help in advancing her magical studies. The vampire's moral compass. If you choose to cure Serana of her vampirism during the Dawnguard questline, she undergoes one of the most significant character transformations available for any follower. Cured Serana loses her vampiric powers but gains the ability to be out in sunlight without penalties, and her dialogue shifts to reflect this major life change. She'll comment on seeing the sun without pain for the first time in centuries and express both relief and uncertainty about her new mortality. What's particularly interesting is that this choice is entirely optional, and many players never cure her, either because they prefer her vampire abilities in combat, or because they feel it would be disrespectful to force such a major change on her character. The game leaves the decision ambiguous, with Serana herself being uncertain about whether she wants to be cured. This moral ambiguity makes the choice more meaningful than simple good or evil binary decisions. The fact that curing Serana is permanent also adds weight to the decision. Players who cure her cannot reverse it, making it one of the few truly consequential companion choices in Skyrim. The Blind Farmer Scholar. Knight Paladin Gelibor is a unique follower in that he's one of the last surviving snow elves before they devolved into the farmer. He's encountered during the Dawnguard questline in the Forgotten Vale, and while he doesn't become a permanent follower, his presence in that questline is significant for Skyrim's lore. Gelibor provides crucial information about the fall of the Snow Elves and their transformation into the farmer, filling in one of the game's most tragic backstories. What makes Gelibor particularly interesting is that he represents what the farmer could have been, a noble, ancient race of elves with their own culture and magic. Seeing him alongside the twisted, blind Fulmer creates a powerful contrast that emphasizes the horror of what the Dwemer did to the Snow Elves. Although Gelibor isn't a traditional follower, his character adds depth to Skyrim's world building and makes the Forgotten Vale one of the most memorable locations in the game. His dialogue about watching his people fall into darkness over centuries provides a melancholic context for every farmer you fight afterward. The hidden vampire, Sibyl Stentor, the court mage of solitude, is secretly a vampire, though the game never explicitly states this through dialogue. Her vampirism can be discovered through several methods. She doesn't register when you cast Detect Life, but does with Detect Dead. She uses Vampiric Drain if forced into combat, and with the Dawnguard DLC installed, she gains the characteristic glowing orange vampire eyes. NPCs in Solitude hint at her true nature through ambient dialogue. Odar the cook mentions he's never seen her eat, and Artar the executioner cryptically refers to her taking volunteers from the dungeon, implying she feeds on prisoners. Despite these clues, Sibyl continues to perform her duties as court mage without anyone taking action against her. This hidden detail suggests a more complex relationship between vampires and mortal society than the game's main narrative presents, showing that not all vampires in Skyrim are mindless monsters. Sibyl represents a vampire who has successfully integrated into human society and maintains a respectable position despite her condition. Unfortunately, she cannot become a follower, which is disappointing given her unique status and the potential for interesting story interactions. The Cowardly Mage. J'zargo's cockiness as a character is well known, but what many players don't realize is that despite his confident demeanor, he has one of the lowest courage ratings among follower AI. This means that in particularly dangerous situations, J'zargo is more likely to flee from combat than other followers. The contrast between his arrogant dialogue and his tendency to run away from tough fights creates an unintentional comedy that many players find endearing. His overconfidence seems to evaporate when faced with dragons, giants, or particularly tough dungeon bosses. This behavioral quirk makes J'zargo feel more like an actual person with genuine fear rather than a fearless combat automaton. However, this same cowardice can be frustrating during difficult battles when you need your follower to hold the line while you heal or reposition. The best strategy with J'zargo is to equip him with strong destruction spells and keep him at range, where his magical damage output is impressive and his tendency to flee is less problematic. The marriage dead end. Many followers can be married once you complete their personal quests and wear an amulet of Mara, but marriage in Skyrim is surprisingly limited in terms of gameplay benefits. Married followers don't gain any special bonuses or unique dialogue beyond the standard spouse conversations. They'll open a shop if they're capable, provide the lover's comfort rest bonus, and occasionally give you a portion of their earnings, but otherwise, marriage doesn't significantly change the follower relationship. This has disappointed many players who hoped for more dynamic relationship mechanics. What's particularly odd is that some followers have extensive romance dialogue in the game files that never made it into the final release, suggesting that Bethesda originally planned more elaborate relationship systems. The cut content includes special dates, unique couple activities, and more personalized dialogue based on your marriage partner's personality. Unfortunately, time constraints meant these features were stripped down to the basic system we got. Despite these limitations, many players still marry their favorite followers purely for roleplay purposes and the sense of having a home to return to. The essential glitch. After completing certain quest lines, some followers who were previously essential become mortal, which means they can now be killed permanently. However, there's a common glitch where followers retain their essential status even after they should have become mortal. This most commonly affects companions members like Ayla, Farkas, and Vilkas. Players will finish the entire companion's questline, assume their followers are now vulnerable, and then be surprised when they refuse to die no matter how much damage they take. This glitch is actually beneficial for players who want immortal followers, but frustrating for those who prefer realistic consequences. The cause appears to be related to quest flag updates, not properly processing when certain conditions are met. Some players have reported that dismissing and re-recruiting the follower can fix this glitch, while others find that it persists for their entire playthrough. The unpredictability of essential status in Skyrim creates confusion about which followers are truly unkillable and which ones are just temporarily protected. The invisible inventory. All followers have a hidden inventory weight limit that affects what they can carry for you, but this limit varies significantly between different followers. Most players assume all followers have the same carrying capacity, but warrior class followers typically have higher limits than mage or thief followers. Additionally, followers have hidden preferences for certain types of equipment and won't always equip the best gear you give them if it doesn't match their preferred combat style. For example, giving a bow-focused follower a powerful warhammer won't make them switch to melee combat. They'll just carry the warhammer without using it. Understanding these hidden mechanics is crucial for optimizing your followers' combat effectiveness. The game never explains these systems, leaving players to discover them through trial and error or by reading external guides. Some followers also have unique inventory items that cannot be removed, such as Ella's default hunting bow or Lydia's sword, which take up permanent inventory space even though you can't access them. The tragic hero. Erender is one of the few followers whose entire backstory is tragic and deeply tied to his personal questline. He's a former priest of Vermina, the Daedric Prince of Nightmares, who betrayed his own brotherhood to escape from Nightcaller Temple. The quest Waking Nightmare reveals his past and gives you the choice to let him complete his redemption or kill him to claim a Daedric artifact. If you spare him, he becomes an essential follower who cannot die. What makes Erender particularly interesting is that his character explores themes of redemption and the cost of past sins. His dialogue reveals genuine remorse for his actions and a desire to make amends by serving Mara instead of Vermina. However, the game also questions whether redemption is truly possible for someone who has done terrible things. This moral complexity makes Erender one of the more thoughtful follower characters. As a companion, he specializes in destruction magic and is particularly effective against undead enemies, making him an excellent choice for dungeon exploration. His priest background also means he has unique dialogue in locations with religious significance. The Beastblood Cure. After completing the companion's questline, you can cure yourself and certain companion followers of lycanthropy through a ritual at the tomb of Isgramor. However, this cure is permanent and cannot be reversed. Many players don't realize this and cure their lycanthropy only to regret it later when they miss the werewolf transformation ability. What makes this particularly interesting for followers is that you can cure Farkas and Vilkas of their werewolf curse, but Ayla will always refuse the cure. This choice reflects their different attitudes toward being a werewolf. Vilkas and Farkas see it as a burden that prevents them from reaching Sovngarde after death, while Isla views it as a sacred gift from her scene. The fact that these characters have different perspectives on the same condition adds depth to their personalities and makes the world feel more lived in. From a gameplay perspective, curing follower werewolves doesn't significantly change their combat effectiveness, since they rarely transform while following you anyway. The Dragon Bridge Patrol. Some potential followers can be first encountered in random world events before you meet them in their standard locations. For example, you might encounter Stenvar fighting bandits on a road before you ever enter the Candlehearth Hall in Windhelm. These random encounters can create confusion because the follower might not be recruitable during the world event, leading players to wonder if they encountered a glitch or a different NPC. What's interesting is that these random encounters were designed to make the world feel more alive and give players glimpses of characters they might recruit later. However, the execution is imperfect, as many players don't make the connection between the random encounter and the recruitable follower they meet later. Some followers also have random encounter variants with slightly different dialogue or behavior, which can make their character seem inconsistent across different playthroughs. The Immortal Dog. Barbas, the talking dog companion of the Daedric prince Clavicus Vile, is one of the strangest followers in Skyrim. He's essential and cannot die, making him an excellent tank for difficult battles. However, Barbas is tied to the Daedric quest, a Daedra's best friend, and technically doesn't count as your main follower, meaning you can have Barbas and a humanoid companion at the same time. What makes Barbas particularly useful is that his essential status is permanent, unlike many followers whose invulnerability is tied to specific quests. You can actually keep Barbas as a companion indefinitely by simply never completing his associated quest. Many players exploit this by using Barbas as an immortal tank while running difficult content. However, Barbas has some annoying quirks. He has terrible pathfinding AI and will frequently get stuck in doorways, block your movement, or trigger traps. His constant barking can also become grating during long play sessions. Despite these annoyances, the combination of immortality and not counting against your follower limit makes Barbas one of the most mechanically powerful companions, even if he's also one of the most irritating. The stealth contradiction. Many followers claim to be skilled at stealth but have AI behavior that completely contradicts this. They'll announce their presence by commenting on dungeons, trigger every trap, and charge directly at enemies even when you're trying to sneak. This disconnect between their character description and actual behavior is one of the most common frustrations players have with Skyrim's follower system. The only followers who are genuinely good at stealth are those from the Dark Brotherhood, specifically Cicero and the Dark Brotherhood Initiates. These followers have modified AI that makes them less likely to break stealth and more likely to use sneak attacks effectively. For players who prefer stealth gameplay, most followers become more of a hindrance than a help, which is why many stealth characters choose to adventure alone, rather than deal with followers who constantly reveal their position. The vampire transformation limitation. If you become a vampire while having a follower, their attitude towards you changes in subtle ways. Some followers have unique dialogue about your vampirism, though most just ignore it entirely. What's more interesting is that followers cannot become vampires themselves, even if you repeatedly feed on them or expose them to vampire attacks. This creates a strange disconnect, where your character is a creature of the night, but your companions remain stubbornly mortal. Serana is the only vampire follower in the game, and even she can be cured, meaning there's no way to build a vampire party for role-playing purposes. This limitation seems like a missed opportunity for more vampire-themed gameplay in Dawnguard. Players who want to roleplay as a vampire lord leading an army of the night are stuck with either Serana or regular mortal followers, who should probably be disturbed by their master's undead nature, but mostly don't comment on it. The equipment preference mystery. Followers have hidden equipment preferences that determine what gear they'll actually use from their inventory. Most warrior followers prefer heavy armor and will equip the heaviest armor pieces you give them, but some warriors surprisingly prefer light armor. Similarly, some mage followers will ignore the powerful staves you give them in favor of their preferred spell combinations. These preferences aren't documented anywhere in the game, leading to confusion when you give a follower what you think is better equipment and they refuse to use it. The best approach is to experiment with each follower to learn their preferences, or consult external wikis that have data mined this information from the game files. Some followers also have minimum armor rating or weapon damage thresholds before they'll consider switching equipment. If the gear you're giving them isn't significantly better than what they already have by their calculation standards, they'll ignore it. The missing dialogue. Followers in Skyrim have relatively limited dialogue compared to what players might expect from such important NPCs. While followers do have location-specific comments and personality-driven interactions, these are fairly minimal. Many followers share generic dialogue lines, with only a few having truly unique personalities. This limitation has led modders to create extensive dialogue expansion mods for popular followers like Lydia, Serana, and Isla, adding hundreds of new voice lines to make them feel more reactive and involved. The base game's follower dialogue system appears to have been designed with time and resource constraints in mind, prioritizing functionality over deep characterization. Some followers received more attention than others. Serana from the Dawnguard DLC has significantly more dialogue than most base game followers, showing what the system could have been with more development time. The sparse dialogue combined with repetitive lines, like Lydia's infamous "I am sworn to carry your burdens," has become one of the most commonly criticized aspects of Skyrim's follower system. The duplication glitch. There's a famous exploit involving followers that allows you to duplicate items. By giving your follower an item and then commanding them to pick up another version of the same item from the ground, you can create extra copies through a timing glitch. This exploit works with most followers and has been used by players to duplicate valuable items like enchanted gear, rare materials, and expensive potions. While Bethesda has patched some version of this glitch, new variations continue to surface. The duplication glitch reveals how follower inventory management is handled differently from player inventory, using separate code that apparently doesn't have the same safeguards against item multiplication. Whether this glitch is worth using depends on your stance toward exploits. Some players see it as clever use of game mechanics, while others consider it cheating that ruins game balance. The mount problem. Followers in Skyrim have a complicated relationship with horses. They can ride horses, but only under specific conditions, and their horse-riding behavior often leads to frustration. When you fast travel while on horseback, followers will often arrive at the destination on foot, even if they had a horse. Sometimes they'll steal random horses from stables, leading to bounties and hostile guards. Other times, they'll follow you on foot while you're mounted, lagging far behind and causing you to wait. The follower mount system was clearly not fully developed during Skyrim's creation, and it shows. Some players resort to using console commands or mods to give their followers permanent horses that won't disappear or cause problems. The fact that this basic functionality works so poorly suggests it was implemented late in development without adequate testing. For players who prefer mounted travel, follower mechanics often become more trouble than they're worth. The racial powers, mystery. All followers have racial abilities based on their character race, but most players never see these abilities activate because follower AI doesn't prioritize using racial powers in combat. For example, Nord followers have battle cry, which makes enemies flee, but you'll rarely, if ever, see them use it. Argonian followers can breathe underwater indefinitely, which actually does work when they're following you into submerged areas. Khajiit followers have night eye and claws for unarmed combat, though they'll prefer weapons when available. Understanding which racial abilities your followers have can influence your choice of companion for specific quests. If you're planning to explore underwater ruins, an Argonian follower makes logical sense. If you're fighting Nords who might resist frost, a Dunmer follower with fire magic is strategically better. However, these racial considerations are minor compared to the follower's overall combat class and equipment. The essential settlement. Most followers have a home location they'll return to if dismissed. But what happens to these home locations can be surprising. If you're married to a follower and move them to a different home, their return location changes to your shared house. However, if that house is in a location that gets attacked, like a Hearthfire homestead vulnerable to giant or bandit raids, your follower might be there during an attack. If they're not essential, they could theoretically die while you're not present. This has led to players returning home to find their spouse follower dead from an off-screen attack they had no chance to prevent. Essential followers are safe from this problem, but the vulnerability of non-essential married followers creates a tragic possibility that Bethesda probably didn't fully consider. The command conflict. Multiple followers from the same faction can create command conflicts where they override each other's orders. For instance, if you have a companion follower and try to recruit a second companion during a quest, the first one might be automatically dismissed, even though you didn't want them to leave. This is because follower slots are managed through faction-specific scripts that sometimes conflict with each other. The most notorious example is recruiting Serana during Dawnguard quests. She'll force your current follower to leave, even if you want to keep both. While the game is designed to allow only one humanoid follower at a time, these forced dismissals can lead to losing track of your previous follower if you don't pay attention to where they went. Some followers will wait where you left them, others will return home, and in rare glitch cases, they might disappear entirely. The pickpocket paradox. You can pickpocket your followers, but the act has weird consequences. Successfully stealing from a follower while they're following you might make them hostile, but it might not, depending on whether they detect the theft. The game treats follower theft differently from stealing from other NPCs, with some followers being more forgiving than others. What's particularly strange is that you can give followers valuable items to carry and then pickpocket those same items back, effectively using them as mobile storage without actually losing access to the items. This trick is most useful for getting around weight limits during long dungeon runs. However, this behavior feels like an oversight rather than an intended feature. The whole follower inventory system seems hastily implemented, with numerous exploits and logical inconsistencies that suggest it wasn't thoroughly tested. The magic immunity. Followers have weird interactions with certain spells and effects. They're immune to most forms of crowd control magic, meaning you can't accidentally paralyze or calm your own follower. However, area of effect spells will still damage them, potentially killing non-essential followers if you're careless with fireball or chain lightning spells. This partial immunity creates confusion about what will and won't affect followers. Some players have accidentally killed their followers with area damage spells without realizing it, then wondered why their companions suddenly became hostile or died. The game doesn't clearly explain these mechanics, leaving players to discover them through tragic experience. The optimal approach is to avoid using large area of effect spells when your follower is in close combat, or to get the companion's insight Black Book power from Dragonborn DLC, which makes your attacks completely unable to harm followers. The sneak attack bonus. When followers attack enemies, they can trigger sneak attack bonuses just like the player. However, follower sneak attacks work differently from player sneak attacks in terms of damage calculation. Followers use simplified sneak damage multipliers that don't benefit from the player's perks, meaning a follower sneak attacking won't do the massive damage that a player with max sneak perks would do. This makes followers like Cicero, who specialize in daggers and sneaking, less effective than you might expect. They'll successfully sneak attack enemies, but the damage boost is nowhere near what the player can achieve. This represents another case where follower mechanics use simplified versions of player systems, creating a feeling that followers are less capable than they should be based on their character descriptions. The armor rating cap. Followers benefit from armor rating just like players, but they have a hidden armor rating cap that prevents them from becoming too tanky. Even if you give a follower multiple pieces of legendary tier Daedric armor with maxed enchantments, they won't become invincible. This cap exists to prevent followers from completely trivializing combat by being unkillable through sheer defense. However, the existence of truly essential followers who literally can't die makes this armor cap feel pointless. Why limit the tankiness of mortal followers when essential followers already can't die, regardless of armor? This design choice suggests the armor cap was implemented early in development, before the developers decided to make certain followers essential for story reasons. The result is a confusing mixed system, where some followers are immortal and others are artificially limited in their defensive potential. The training exploit. Evolution. The follower trainer gold exploit mentioned earlier has interesting implications for game progression. By recruiting follower trainers early and using them to max out skills cheaply, you can create overpowered character builds at low levels. This is particularly true for Faendal, who can be recruited very early in the game and provides archery training up to level 50. A new player can essentially max out archery before leaving the Riverwood area, fundamentally changing the difficulty curve of the entire game. Bethesda was clearly aware of this exploit, as evidenced by the fact that some follower trainers have protected gold that can't be retrieved. However, they didn't fix it consistently, suggesting they either ran out of development time or decided the exploit wasn't game-breaking enough to warrant a comprehensive fix. The existence of this exploit has divided the player community, with purists avoiding it and min-maxers embracing it as a key part of efficient character building. The restoration staff obsession. Mage followers who specialize in restoration magic have a frustrating tendency to equip healing staves instead of using offensive magic. You'll give them a powerful destruction staff, and they'll ignore it in favor of a basic healing staff that barely helps in combat. This happens because the follower AI prioritizes restoration actions when health is below certain thresholds, and having a restoration staff causes them to switch to it more frequently. The result is a follower who spends more time healing themselves than actually fighting enemies. The easiest fix is to simply not give restoration-focused followers any staves at all, forcing them to rely on their spellcasting instead. However, this feels counterintuitive since staves should enhance a mage's combat effectiveness. The issue reveals how simplistic follower AI really is when it comes to tactical decision-making during combat. The swimming speed difference. Followers swim at different speeds than the player character, and this often leads to them getting left behind or lost during underwater sections. The game's swimming mechanics weren't designed with follower pathfinding in mind, resulting in followers sometimes drowning, swimming in circles, or teleporting to catch up with the player. Argonian followers technically have underwater breathing through their racial ability, but even they can have pathfinding problems in complex underwater areas. The best approach to underwater exploration is to leave your follower on land if possible, as bringing them into submerged areas often creates more problems than benefits. This represents another case where Skyrim's environmental mechanics weren't fully integrated with the follower system, creating awkward situations that break immersion. The faction conflict. Some followers are members of factions that oppose each other, creating potential conflicts in certain quests. For example, if you have a Stormcloak follower and join the Imperial Legion, that follower might have unique dialogue about their conflicted loyalties. However, these faction relationships are mostly cosmetic and don't actually prevent followers from accompanying you on opposing faction quests. This creates situations where you can bring a committed Stormcloak into an Imperial camp, and everyone acts like nothing is wrong. The lack of meaningful faction integration with followers suggests this was another feature that Bethesda planned but didn't fully implement. In a more developed system, bringing certain followers on the faction quest would cause real problems, or at least trigger significant dialogue, acknowledging the awkward situation. The Ghost Companion. There's a rare glitch where followers can die, but continue to follow you as invisible ghosts. This happens when the follower's death animation is interrupted by loading a new area or fast traveling at the exact wrong moment. The ghost follower can't be interacted with, doesn't appear visually, but still makes noise and can trigger traps. Players who experience this glitch often don't realize what's happening at first, just noticing that traps are going off when no one is near them or hearing combat sounds from invisible sources. The only fix is to load an earlier save before the follower died, or to use console commands to reset the follower's state. This glitch is terrifying when it first happens, turning what should be a tragic companion death into an unintended horror experience where your dead friend haunts you indefinitely. The enchantment drain. Unlike the player, followers don't have infinite enchantment charges on the weapons you give them. If you give a follower an enchanted sword, the enchantment will slowly drain during combat until it runs out completely. Most players don't realize this and wonder why their follower's powerful fire sword suddenly stopped producing flames. The enchantment drain happens much faster for followers than for players, because follower combat behavior involves more frequent weapon swings. This means you need to either regularly recharge your followers' enchanted weapons using soul gems, give them multiple enchanted weapons to cycle through, or accept that their enchantments will frequently be depleted. Managing follower enchantment charges is yet another hidden maintenance task that the game never explains. contributing to the feeling that followers require more babysitting than they're worth. The quest item jail. If you give your follower a quest item for storage and then dismiss them, that quest item goes with them to their home location. If you then forget which follower has the item or where that follower lives, you can get stuck unable to complete the quest because the required item is inaccessible. This has trapped many players in broken quest states, where the solution is to retrace their steps through multiple former followers' homes to find who has the missing item. Some quest items also become permanently stuck in follower inventories due to glitches, unable to be removed even with console commands. The game should prevent followers from carrying quest items, or at least track which follower has what quest item. But these safeguards weren't implemented. This oversight has frustrated countless players and spawned numerous forum threads of people desperately trying to remember which follower they gave which item to. The transformation spectator. When you transform into a werewolf or vampire lord, your follower will stand by and watch, without reacting negatively in most cases. This is strange from a lore perspective, as most people in Skyrim fear werewolves and vampires. Your follower should logically be terrified or hostile when you transform into a monster and start mauling people, but they just calmly watch as if this is perfectly normal. This disconnect between gameplay and lore immersion is particularly noticeable with followers who are explicitly against vampires or werewolves. A Dawnguard follower watching you transform into a vampire lord without caring creates a moment of cognitive dissonance that breaks immersion. The only followers who logically should be okay with your transformations are those who are themselves werewolves or vampires. But even followers with no connection to these factions treat your monstrous forms as unremarkable. The speech skill. Impact. Your speech skill affects how much money followers cost to hire and what persuasion options you have when recruiting them. But once they're following you, speech skill has no further impact on your relationship. You might expect higher speech to unlock new dialogue options or improve your followers' combat effectiveness through better coordination, but none of these effects exist. Speech is purely a recruitment tool, not an ongoing relationship manager. This makes speech feel like one of the less useful skills for characters who focus on follower-based gameplay, since most followers can be recruited without high speech anyway. The lack of ongoing speech skill benefits in follower relationships represents another missed opportunity for deeper companion mechanics. The Trap Trigger Master. Followers have a terrible tendency to trigger every trap in a dungeon, from swinging axes to pressure plates that release poison gas. Their pathfinding AI doesn't recognize most trap triggers as dangerous, causing them to blunder through dungeons, setting off everything in sight. This is particularly problematic in Nord Ruins, with lots of spike traps and oil fires. Your follower will walk directly through the obvious trap, take damage, and force you to deal with the triggered mechanism. Some players have learned to use this follower behavior strategically, deliberately sending the followers ahead to trigger traps so the player can pass safely afterward. However, this tactic requires the follower to be tanky enough to survive multiple trap hits, which isn't always the case. The general recommendation for dungeon diving is to keep your follower close and carefully navigate traps yourself, treating your companion as a walking liability when it comes to environmental hazards. The Blessing Immunity. Followers don't benefit from shrine blessings or standing stone powers, meaning these important buffs only affect the player. This creates a significant power gap between your character and your follower as you progress through the game. While you're getting increasingly powerful through blessings, standing stones, and Black Book powers, your follower remains static aside from level scaling and equipment upgrades. The inability to share buffs with followers means they become relatively weaker compared to the player character as the game progresses, even if you give them good equipment. This contributes to the feeling that followers are more useful in early and mid-game than in late-game content, where their limited AI and lack of buff access makes them less effective than simply using summon spells or going solo. The death cam confusion. When a follower gets killed, the game doesn't always clearly indicate this has happened, unlike player death, which triggers a dramatic camera and loads a save. Follower death is often subtle. Your companion might collapse in the middle of a chaotic battle, and you might not notice until afterward when you try to give them a command and they don't respond. This ambiguity has caused players to continue playing for hours before realizing their follower died several fights ago. By that point, all their autosaves have overwritten the saves where the follower was still alive, forcing players to either accept the permadeath or lose significant progress. The lack of a clear follower death notification seems like an oversight, as it creates situations where players don't realize they've experienced a significant loss until it's too late to easily fix it. The door blocking specialist. Followers have terrible positional awareness in narrow spaces, frequently blocking doorways and corridors at the worst possible moments. You'll be trying to escape from a group of powerful enemies, and your follower will stand in the only exit, trapping you inside. Pushing past followers is possible but clunky, and in combat situations, those extra seconds of being stuck can mean the difference between life and death. This blocking behavior is especially frustrating in Dwemer ruins and Nordic crypts with lots of narrow passages. Some players have developed elaborate strategies for managing follower positioning, including using the "wait here" command frequently and dismissing followers before entering tight spaces. The fact that players need to develop workarounds for basic follower pathfinding speaks to how underdeveloped this system is. In a more polished game, followers would intelligently move aside when blocking the player's path, but Skyrim's follower AI lacks this basic awareness. The combat style rigidity. Each follower has a predefined combat style that they'll stick to regardless of the situation. Ranged followers will stay at range even when it would be more effective to switch to melee. Melee followers will charge in even when staying back would be safer. This inflexibility means you need to choose followers based on how their combat style complements your own playstyle. A stealth archer works well with melee tank followers who can distract enemies while you pick them off from distance. A melee warrior benefits from ranged magic followers who can attack from safety. However, followers never adapt their tactics based on the specific encounter, leading to situations where their rigid combat style is completely inappropriate. A berserker follower charging a frost troll alone while you're a squishy mage desperately needs their protection, creates avoidable deaths that smarter AI could prevent. The morality settings. Followers have hidden morality settings that determine what actions they will or won't accept from the player. These settings range from no crime followers who will report you for stealing, to any crime followers who don't care what you do. Most players discover their followers' morality through trial and error, accidentally making their companion hostile by committing crimes in front of them. What's frustrating is that the game never tells you your followers' moral boundaries until you cross them. A follower might tolerate assault and murder, but draw the line at stealing, creating ethical confusion about what's acceptable. The most useful followers for morally flexible playstyles are those with any crime settings, particularly Dark Brotherhood members and certain Thieves Guild associates. However, Even knowing this information requires consulting external guides, as the game provides no way to learn follower morality in advance. The spell power scaling. Mage followers' spells scale with their level, but the scaling is handled differently than player spell progression. A follower at level 30 using Firebolt will do less damage than a player at level 30 using the same spell, because followers don't benefit from the magic boosting perks that players can take. This means mage followers become relatively weaker compared to warrior followers as levels increase. A warrior follower can be given increasingly powerful weapons that dramatically boost their damage, while mage followers are stuck with spell damage that scales slowly. This imbalance explains why warrior followers are generally considered more effective than mage followers in combat. The best mage followers are those like Jazago who can reach very high levels, as their spell damage continues scaling even if it doesn't match player-casted versions of the same spells. For players who want effective mage companions, the solution is usually to give them powerful staves in addition to their spells, as staves provide consistent damage that doesn't rely on underwhelming spell scaling. The summoning conflict. If both you and your follower have summoned spells or abilities, you can potentially have multiple summoned creatures active at once. However, the game's summon limit applies to your total party, not individual characters. This means if you summon 2 Dremora Lords, your follower might not be able to summon anything because you've reached the summon cap. The way summoning limits work with followers isn't clearly explained, leading to confusion when your conjuration-focused follower suddenly stops summoning creatures. The optimal strategy is to either focus on summoning yourself while having a non-summoner follower, or let your follower handle summoning while you focus on direct combat. Trying to have both you and your follower summon at the same time is inefficient and runs into limit issues. This is yet another follower mechanic that requires external research to understand, as nothing in the game explains how summoning limits work across your party. The Steward system. The Hearthfire DLC allows you to appoint certain followers as stewards for your custom-built homesteads. Steward followers can buy building materials, furnish rooms, and even hire bards for your home. What many players don't realize is that making a follower your steward doesn't prevent them from also being your active companion. You can have your house steward leave the house and follow you on adventures, then return to manage your property afterward. This dual role functionality makes steward-capable followers more valuable than those who can't serve in this capacity. However, the steward system has glitches. Sometimes stewards will stop recognizing you as the homeowner, preventing you from accessing certain furniture or building options. Other times, stewards will disappear entirely when you try to move them between homes. The Hearthfire integration with existing followers feels tacked on, with numerous bugs suggesting this feature wasn't thoroughly tested before release. The horse ownership problem. When followers steal horses, those horses technically become stolen property, giving you a bounty if you're caught near them. This creates absurd situations where your follower's crime becomes your legal problem. Guards might approach you about the stolen horse that you didn't steal and have no way to return. Some players have accumulated massive bounties simply from their followers' horse theft habits. The easiest solution is to buy horses for both you and your follower from stables, ensuring legitimate ownership. However, as mentioned earlier, follower horses have their own set of problems with persistence and fast travel. The entire mounted follower system feels half-finished, with basic functionality working poorly and edge cases creating game-breaking bugs. For many players, the simplest solution is to avoid using horses at all when traveling with followers. The faction gear problem. Followers who belong to specific factions like the Companions or Dark Brotherhood will sometimes prioritize wearing their faction armor over better equipment you give them. This happens because faction gear has special flags that make followers prefer it regardless of armor rating. You can give Erla a full set of legendary Dragonscale armor, but she might still wear her standard Ancient Nord armor because it's flagged as Companions gear. The only way around this is to use console commands to remove the faction preference flags, or to accept that your follower will sometimes choose thematic armor over optimal armor. From a role-playing perspective, this faction armor preference makes sense. Members of the Companions should be proud to wear their faction's armor. From a gameplay perspective, it's frustrating to give followers good gear that they refuse to use for invisible reasons the game never explains. The essential quest followers. During certain quests, specific followers become temporarily essential and will follow you regardless of whether you already have a follower. These quest essential followers can create a situation where you have multiple followers at once, breaking the normal one follower limit. Some players deliberately avoid completing these quests in order to maintain multiple followers indefinitely. For example, during the quest to investigate the Hall of the Vigilant, you can have both your regular follower and the quest follower active simultaneously. As long as you don't complete the quest, this state persists, allowing you to adventure with a small party. This exploit reveals how janky follower management code is, with different systems checking for follower status in inconsistent ways. While having multiple followers can make combat easier, it also increases pathfinding problems and friendly fire incidents. The voice acting budget. Most followers in Skyrim are voiced by the same handful of voice actors, leading to situations where multiple followers sound identical. This is particularly noticeable with male Nord followers, who almost all share the same voice actor speaking in the same gruff Nordic accent. This voice recycling breaks immersion when you switch between followers and realize they sound exactly the same despite being different characters. Cicero is notable specifically because he has a unique voice actor, making him stand out from the crowd. Serana also has a unique voice, which is one reason she's so popular. The voice acting budget limitations created a situation where follower personalities are often conveyed more through their limited dialogue than through voice performance. This makes followers with unique voices or extensive dialogue feel much more memorable than generic followers with recycled voice acting. The regeneration discrepancy. Followers regenerate health, magicka, and stamina at different rates than players, and these rates vary between different followers. Some followers regenerate health quickly, making them surprisingly durable in extended fights. Others have slow health regeneration that makes them vulnerable to sustained damage. The game never displays follower stat regeneration rates, leaving players to guess based on combat observation. What makes this particularly confusing is that a follower might survive well in short fights, but struggle in long battles because their health regeneration can't keep up with incoming damage. Understanding your followers' regeneration characteristics helps determine what combat situations they can handle. Unfortunately, finding this information requires extensive testing or consulting data-mined game files, as nothing in the interface explains these hidden stats. The conjuration confusion. When a follower with conjuration magic summons a creature, that summons sometimes counts against your summon limit, and sometimes doesn't, depending on obscure internal factors. This inconsistency means you might be able to summon creatures alongside your followers' summons in one fight, but not in another fight, using the same follower and spells. The summon limit code apparently doesn't handle follower summons consistently, creating unpredictable behavior. This is especially frustrating for players who build their combat strategy around summons, as the reliability of having multiple summoned allies varies seemingly at random. The conjuration system's interaction with followers is another example of game mechanics that weren't fully debugged, leaving players to work around unpredictable behavior rather than understanding clear rules. The crime scene witness. Followers who witness you commit crimes will sometimes report you to guards and sometimes won't, depending on their relationship level with you. The hidden relationship stat that builds through questing and dialogue choices determines whether your follower turns a blind eye to your crimes. High relationship followers will ignore even serious crimes like murder, while low relationship followers might report you for simple theft. However, the game never shows your relationship level with followers, making it impossible to know whether your companion will betray you. Some players have been shocked when their follower of many adventures suddenly reports them for pickpocketing, not realizing their relationship wasn't as strong as they assumed. The crime witness system interacts with follower morality and relationship in ways that create confusing and sometimes unfair outcomes. The death scream echo. When non-essential followers die, they make death sounds that can be surprisingly emotional for players attached to their companions. Lydia's death scream has become infamous in the Skyrim community, with many players reporting genuine distress at hearing their loyal housecarl's final moments. This emotional impact is somewhat accidental, as Bethesda probably didn't expect players to become as attached to followers as they did. The death sounds are generic based on race and gender, but they land with impact when you've spent dozens of hours adventuring with a character. This unintentional emotional resonance has influenced many players' decisions about difficulty settings, essential status mods, and save scumming behavior. Players who normally accept deaths and consequences in games will reload saves to prevent follower deaths specifically because of how these deaths feel. The fast travel desync. Fast traveling with a follower can cause them to desync from you, arriving at the destination several seconds after you do. During those seconds, enemies might detect you while you're alone, starting combat before your follower has loaded in to help. This creates unfair ambush situations where your defensive strategy relies on your follower tanking enemies, but they're not present when combat starts. The desync is especially bad when fast traveling to outdoor locations during busy combat situations. Some players have developed habits of waiting several seconds after fast travel before moving, ensuring their follower has time to spawn in. This workaround shouldn't be necessary, but the alternative is regularly getting ambushed while your backup hasn't arrived yet. The fast travel desync is particularly frustrating given how crucial fast travel is to Skyrim's exploration, making it a constantly recurring problem rather than a rare annoyance. The spell absorption mystery. Followers don't benefit from spell absorption effects the same way players do, meaning that perks like Atronak or enchantments with spell absorption won't protect your followers from incoming magic. This creates situations where you're immune to a mage's spells, but your follower is getting blasted repeatedly by the same attacks you're absorbing. The asymmetry between player and follower defensive mechanics means you need to account for your followers' vulnerabilities even when you've built your character to counter specific threats. Magic-heavy dungeons become more dangerous when you have a follower because you can't protect them with your own defensive builds. Some players respond by giving followers magic resistance, enchantments, or choosing followers with naturally high magic resistance like Nords with frost resistance. However, The fundamental problem remains that followers can't benefit from the full range of defensive options players can access. The snoring companion. Followers make snoring sounds when sleeping, but these sounds play regardless of whether they're actually in a bed or just standing around your home. This creates amusing situations where your follower is standing fully armored in your living room, weapon drawn, making loud snoring noises. The snoring animation trigger is apparently disconnected from the actual sleeping behavior, leading to this common bug. Some players find the snoring charming and immersive, while others find it annoying and immersion-breaking. The fact that followers snore while standing guard suggests their sleep state and animation state are tracked separately and don't always sync up. This is a minor bug, but one that many players encounter and remember because of how odd it looks when your battle-ready warrior is snoring while standing at attention. The clothing preference. Some followers refuse to wear certain types of clothing or armor based on hidden preferences in their character data. These preferences aren't always logical from a roleplay perspective. A follower might refuse to wear robes even though they're a mage, or refuse to wear heavy armor even though they have high heavy armor skill. These refusals happen silently. The follower simply won't equip the items you give them, leaving players confused about why their companion is ignoring perfectly good equipment. The clothing preferences seem to be tied to the follower's combat class designation, which sometimes conflicts with their actual skill loadout. A follower classified as a thief might refuse heavy armor, even if they'd benefit from it. Working around these preferences requires understanding each follower's hidden class designation, information that's not accessible in-game without console commands or external resources. The Dragon Soul priority. When you kill a dragon with a follower present, the game determines who absorbs the Dragon Soul based on who lands the killing blow and proximity to the dragon's corpse when it dies. While the Dragonborn should always be the one to absorb Dragon Souls according to the law, some players have reported rare instances where followers seem to interfere with the soul absorption animation, causing delays or confusion about whether the soul was absorbed. This appears to be related to how the game determines positioning and line of sight when the dragon dies rather than followers actually stealing souls. The most common issue is followers standing between the player and the dragon corpse, which can block the absorption animation temporarily. While there are occasional player reports of missing dragon souls, this is more likely due to quest-related dragons that don't grant souls or bugs in the absorption script, rather than followers actually taking the soul. This remains one of the more controversial claims in the community, with most evidence pointing to positioning bugs rather than followers genuinely absorbing souls meant for the Dragonborn. The inventory weight exploit. Followers can be given unlimited items even after they say they're overburdened, by using the "I need you to do something" command and making them pick items up directly from containers or the ground. This exploit bypasses their normal carrying capacity limits entirely. Players can use this trick to turn followers into infinite storage mules, carrying thousands of pounds of loot without any penalty. The exploit works because the pick up that item command uses different code than the "carry this for me" command, and the pickup command doesn't check weight limits. This has become one of the most famous Skyrim exploits, essential knowledge for players who like to loot everything. While clearly unintended, Bethesda never patched it, possibly because it solves the inventory management problem that many players struggle with. The choice to use this exploit or not becomes a personal decision about game balance and intended challenge. The faction dialogue. Oddities. Followers from specific factions have dialogue that sometimes contradicts their behavior. Companions members will talk about honor and glory, but then watch silently as you pickpocket innocent people. Dark Brotherhood followers discuss the sanctity of contracts, but don't react when you kill randomly. These dialogue behavior contradictions suggest that follower dialogue was written before their behavior scripts were finalized, or vice versa, leading to mismatches. The worst contradictions occur with followers who are explicitly against certain activities, but don't actually prevent you from doing them. Mjol claims to hate the Thieves Guild and criminals, but she'll follow you through Thieves Guild quest lines without complaint. These contradictions break immersion for players paying attention to character consistency, making followers feel like they lack genuine convictions. The marriage shop income. Married followers who run shops will generate daily income that they share with you, but this income is pitifully small compared to what you can earn through adventuring. The shop system was apparently designed for early game economy, generating a few hundred gold per day at most. By the time most players get married, they're earning thousands of gold per dungeon run, making the spouse's shop income nearly worthless. However, the shop system does provide some useful functionality. Your spouse can sell items for you, acting as a fence without the Thieves Guild requirement. They also can restock vendors if you give them gold to invest in their shop. These minor benefits don't make spouse shops particularly valuable, but they're thematically appropriate and give married followers something to do besides standing around your house. The respawn timer difference. When you dismiss a follower and they return to their home location, there's a delay before they actually appear there. This respawn timer varies between different followers and locations, ranging from a few in-game hours to a full day. During this time, if you go to the follower's home location looking for them, they won't be there yet, leading to confusion. Some players worry they've lost their follower permanently, not realizing they just need to wait for the respawn timer to complete. This timer seems unnecessary from a gameplay perspective and only serves to frustrate players trying to retrieve or switch followers. The timer length appears to be tied to the distance between where you dismiss the follower and their home location, with farther distances requiring longer waits. Understanding this mechanic prevents panic when your follower doesn't immediately appear where they're supposed to be. The battle music. Trigger. Followers can trigger battle music by entering combat with enemies you haven't detected yet. This often spoils surprise encounters, as you'll suddenly hear combat music and realize your follower has agroed something ahead. For stealth players, this is incredibly annoying, as the battle music alert happens before you can position yourself for sneak attacks. The follower's larger detection radius compared to player sneak detection means they'll spot enemies first in many situations. Some players deal with this by keeping followers far back during dungeon exploration, essentially soloing content with an occasional follower backup for tough fights. Others simply accept that having a follower means sacrificing the surprise advantage in many encounters. The battle music trigger issue is another reason why stealth builds often choose to adventure without followers. The dual-wielding follower problem. Followers who dual-wield weapons have a frustrating tendency to unequip their weapons randomly, leaving them punching enemies with fists instead of using the good weapons you gave them. This glitch appears to be related to how the game handles dual-wielding item slots, which sometimes get confused and cause followers to drop their equipped weapons. When this happens mid-combat, your follower becomes effectively useless until you pause, access their inventory, and re-equip their weapons manually. The frequency of this glitch varies, with some players never experiencing it and others seeing it constantly. It seems to be more common when followers dual-wield enchanted weapons, or when switching between follower combat modes. The unpredictability makes dual-wielding followers frustrating for players who want reliable combat performance. The torchlight mechanics. Giving a follower a torch causes them to automatically light it in dark areas, providing illumination that can be helpful or harmful depending on the situation. For exploration, the extra light is useful. For stealth, it's terrible, as the bright torch announces your presence to every enemy. What many players don't realize is that followers won't drop or extinguish torches on their own. If you give them a torch and then want them to stop using it, you need to manually remove it from their inventory. Forgetting about a torch in your follower's inventory can lead to them randomly pulling it out during important stealth missions, ruining your approach. The torch mechanic is another small system that requires active management and can cause problems if you don't remember to check your follower's inventory regularly. The speech tree paralysis. Followers can be affected by paralysis effects from magic or weapons, but while paralyzed, they're completely invulnerable to damage. This creates an exploit where you can deliberately paralyze your follower before difficult fights, making them temporarily immortal. While paralyzed, they can't help you fight, but they also can't die, allowing them to survive encounters that would normally kill them. When the paralysis ends, they'll resume fighting from full health. This exploit is particularly useful for keeping non-essential followers alive through dragon fights or other high-damage encounters. Like many Skyrim exploits, this one reveals unintuitive interactions between different game systems. The developers probably didn't consider that players would deliberately paralysis their own followers as a defensive strategy, so they never implemented code to prevent this tactic. The equipment visual glitch. Sometimes followers will visually appear to be wearing equipment they don't actually have equipped, or vice versa. You'll see them walking around in their underwear while their armor shows as equipped in their inventory, or wearing armor that's actually in their backpack. This visual desync between displayed and actual equipment creates confusion and looks ridiculous. The glitch seems to be related to rapid equipment changes or zone transitions happening while the follower is re-equipping gear. The only reliable fix is to dismiss and re-recruit the follower, forcing their equipment display to refresh. This visual glitch doesn't affect the follower's actual stats or combat performance, but it breaks immersion and makes it hard to tell what gear your companion is really using. The container access problem. Followers can sometimes get stuck trying to access containers, standing frozen in the container opening animation without actually opening the container. This happens most frequently with modded containers or containers placed in unusual locations. When a follower gets stuck this way, they become unresponsive to commands and might remain frozen indefinitely. The only solution is to push them away from the container physically or use console commands to reset their AI. This container stuck glitch is annoying because it can happen in the middle of dungeons, forcing you to either leave your follower behind or spend time trying to unstick them. The root cause appears to be pathfinding AI getting confused about how to approach and interact with certain containers, leading to a soft lock state. The resurrection quirk. When you use console commands or spells to resurrect a dead follower, they often return with their default equipment instead of the gear they were wearing when they died. This means any expensive enchanted armor you gave them is lost permanently, even though they're alive again. The resurrection process apparently resets the follower's inventory to default values, treating their death as removing all their non-default items. This makes resurrection a risky proposition for followers you've heavily invested in equipment-wise. Some players work around this by using the resurrect command immediately after death before the game saves, allowing them to resurrect the follower while their equipped items are still in game memory. However, this requires quick console command execution and doesn't always work. The safest approach is to prevent follower deaths through saving frequently or using essential status. The magic resist stacking. Followers can benefit from multiple sources of magic resistance that stack together, potentially reaching the 85% cap through enchanted armor, racial bonuses, and potion effects. A fully optimized follower with magic resistance gear can become nearly immune to spell damage, making them surprisingly tanky against mages. However, achieving this requires careful equipment selection and understanding which resistance sources stack versus which ones override each other. Most players never optimize follower magic resistance because the system is complicated and the game doesn't explain the mechanics. For players who do invest the time, a magic-resistant tank follower can trivialize mage-heavy dungeons. The flip side is that fully optimizing followers this way takes significant resources and planning, time that many players prefer to spend on their own character's equipment. The combat music persistence. Sometimes, after a follower kills an enemy, combat music continues playing indefinitely, even though all enemies are dead. This happens when the game's combat state gets confused about whether battle is still ongoing. The persistent combat music prevents you from resting, fast traveling, or waiting, making it more than just an audio annoyance. The only reliable fix is to enter and exit combat again by finding a new enemy, which resets the combat state properly. This glitch is especially frustrating in remote areas where finding another enemy to trigger proper combat resolution is difficult. The combat music persistence seems to be related to followers getting the killing blow under certain conditions, causing the game's combat tracker to lose track of who is fighting whom. The following distance variance. Different followers keep different distances from the player while following, with some staying close and others lagging far behind. This variance seems to be tied to the follower's class and movement speed, but the exact formula isn't clear. Fast-moving followers like Khajiit tend to stay closer, while heavily armored followers lumber behind. The following distance affects how useful followers are in combat. Close followers arrive at fights quickly, but get hit by more area damage. Distant followers take longer to engage, but stay safer from splash effects. Understanding your specific follower's following distance helps you plan combat positioning better, but this information isn't displayed anywhere and has to be learned through observation. The aggression level mystery. Every follower has a hidden aggression stat that determines how quickly they engage enemies and how far they'll pursue fleeing targets. High aggression followers, like Stenvar, charge into battle the moment they detect enemies. Low aggression followers wait for the enemy to get closer, or for you to attack first. This aggression variance affects combat pacing significantly. High aggression followers force more aggressive combat, while low aggression followers allow more tactical positioning. Players who prefer different combat styles should choose followers whose aggression matches their preferences, but the game never tells you any follower's aggression level. You have to test it by watching how quickly they engage in various fights, or consult external data sources that have extracted this information from game files. The armor class mismatch. Some followers have high skill levels in armor types they won't actually wear. A follower might have rank 100 in heavy armor, but refuse to equip heavy armor pieces because their class designation flags them as preferring light armor. This creates a situation where the follower's skills suggest one playstyle, but their actual behavior follows another. The mismatch seems to come from incomplete character design, where skill levels were set independently from equipment preferences. Players who don't understand this distinction might waste time giving followers armor they'll never use, not realizing the invisible class flags override the visible skill numbers. Checking follower equipment preferences through testing or external guides is necessary to avoid this trap. The potion consumption rate. Followers consume healing potions much faster than players typically do, because their AI is programmed to drink potions at relatively high health thresholds. A follower might drink a potion when they reach 70% health, while players usually wait until they're closer to death. This aggressive potion use means followers will quickly burn through any healing potions in their inventory. While this keeps them alive, it's expensive if you're giving them valuable potions. The solution is to either only give followers cheap healing potions or accept the cost of keeping them supplied with better options. Understanding potion consumption rates helps manage the ongoing maintenance cost of keeping followers alive through difficult content. The quest marker interference. When a follower holds a quest item, the quest marker sometimes points to the follower instead of the quest objective. This creates confusion about where to go next, as the marker leads you back to your own companion. The interference happens because the game is tracking the quest item's location, and that location is technically wherever your follower is standing. The simple fix is to take the quest item from your follower, but players don't always realize their follower has the item, causing the marker confusion. This issue is particularly frustrating during complex multi-objective quests where keeping track of different quest items across your character and follower inventories becomes genuinely difficult. The transformation duration. When you transform into a werewolf, the transformation duration is affected by the number of enemies you kill. However, followers can interfere with this by killing enemies that you would have killed, effectively shortening your werewolf duration. This creates a situation where having a high damage follower actively hurts your werewolf effectiveness. The solution is to either dismiss your follower before transforming, or accept that they'll reduce your werewolf time. Many werewolf-focused players choose to adventure without followers specifically because of this conflict. The transformation duration system apparently wasn't designed with followers in mind, creating yet another case where follower presence creates unintended mechanical problems. The default bow problem. Most followers don't have a default bow in their invisible default inventory, meaning if you want them to use ranged attacks, you must provide both a bow and arrows. However, a few followers do have default bows that they'll pull out if you don't give them a better option. These default bows are usually weak hunting bows that become useless in higher level content. The inconsistency about which followers have default bows creates confusion. You might assume all followers can use ranged attacks, not realizing some lack the equipment to do so. Checking whether your follower has a default bow requires either testing in combat or checking their base inventory through console commands. This is another hidden detail that significantly affects follower combat performance, but isn't communicated to players. The loading screen separation. Followers can be separated from you during loading screen transitions if they're too far behind when you enter a door. The game makes a distance check when you transition, and if your follower isn't close enough, they don't follow you through. They'll remain in the previous area, often confused and waiting. When you realize they're missing and backtrack, you'll find them standing near where you entered the door. This separation can be dangerous if you walk into a difficult encounter expecting your follower to back you up, only to discover you're alone. The loading screen separation issue is particularly common in cities and large dungeons with multiple connecting areas. Keeping your follower close when approaching transitions prevents this problem, but it requires constant awareness of their position. The faction reputation transfer. Your reputation with factions doesn't affect how follower members of that faction treat you once they're following you. A follower who is a member of a faction you're hostile with won't become hostile themselves, even though logically they should. This creates situations where you can have Stormcloak followers while fighting for the Imperials, or Thieves Guild followers while serving as a guard. The complete lack of faction loyalty enforcement makes followers feel like mindless servants, rather than characters with their own beliefs and allegiances. From a gameplay perspective, this flexibility is convenient, letting players mix and match followers without worrying about faction conflicts. From a role-playing perspective, it's disappointing and breaks immersion for players who want followers to behave consistently with their factional identities. The knockback vulnerability. Followers are much more vulnerable to knockback effects than players, getting sent flying by shouts, giant clubs, and other heavy attacks. While knocked back, they're completely vulnerable and can't defend themselves. Multiple knockbacks in quick succession can keep a follower perma-stunned, effectively removing them from combat. This knockback vulnerability is especially problematic against giants, whose attacks send followers flying across the landscape. The combat balancing apparently didn't account for how devastating repeated knockbacks could be. Players learn to position themselves between their follower and enemies with strong knockback abilities, trying to protect their companion from attacks that will incapacitate them. This protective positioning adds a layer of strategy to follower-based combat, though it's frustrating that it's necessary due to follower vulnerability. The corpse cleanup. When followers die, their corpses remain in the game world indefinitely. Unlike regular NPC corpses that eventually disappear, follower bodies persist, creating morbid reminders of your failures. If you've had multiple followers die throughout your playthrough, you can encounter their corpses days or weeks later when revisiting areas. This persistent corpse system creates emotional weight for follower deaths, but also contributes to clutter in heavily trafficked areas. Some players have reported lag in areas where multiple follower corpses have accumulated, suggesting the persistent corpse system can affect performance. The only way to remove follower corpses is through console commands or by using area cleanup mods, as the game doesn't provide any legitimate method for corpse disposal. The essential status confusion. The game is inconsistent about displaying whether followers are essential or not. Some essential followers show the protected status in console command checks, while others show as essential, and still others show as normal despite being functionally unkillable. This inconsistency makes it difficult to know for certain whether a follower can die without testing it directly. Different wikis and guides sometimes contradict each other about which followers are essential, because the game's internal flags are confusing and sometimes conditional. A follower might be essential during certain quests, but mortal afterward, or vice versa. The lack of clear essential status indication means players who want to avoid follower permadeath have to research each potential companion carefully, or use mods that make all followers essential. The relationship reset. Dismissing and re-recruiting a follower sometimes resets their relationship progress with you, removing friendship bonuses and potentially changing their willingness to commit crimes for you. This relationship reset is inconsistent and doesn't always happen, making it unpredictable. When it does happen, you might notice your formerly loyal follower suddenly reporting minor crimes or refusing to carry certain items. The relationship system was apparently not designed to handle repeated dismissal and recruitment, causing the friendship tracking to glitch. For players who frequently swap followers, this creates a situation where building strong relationships is pointless, since those relationships might reset at any moment. The inconsistency of the reset makes it even more frustrating. Players can't rely on understanding when their follower relationships are safe versus vulnerable to reset. The sneak attack preference. Followers programmed for stealth gameplay will sometimes choose to sneak attack when charging directly would be faster and more effective. This leads to situations where your follower is carefully sneaking toward an enemy that has already detected you and is actively attacking. The follower's commitment to their stealth programming overrides their ability to recognize that stealth is no longer tactically appropriate. This creates comedy where your assassin companion is sneaking in slow motion through a room full of enemies who are all already fighting you. The inflexible AI behavior shows how followers can't adapt their tactics to dynamic combat situations, sticking to their program preferences even when those preferences are counterproductive. The dragon landing zone. When dragons land during fights, followers often get trapped underneath them, clipping through the dragon's body and getting stuck. While stuck, they can't attack effectively and sometimes can't move at all until the dragon takes off again. This dragon clipping issue affects all followers, but is particularly problematic for melee fighters who need to get close to the dragon. Ranged followers can at least attack from outside the clipping zone. The dragon landing mechanics apparently don't account for followers properly, treating them as simple objects that can overlap with the dragon's collision box. Players learn to position themselves to bait dragons into landing in open areas where followers have room to maneuver. But this workaround shouldn't be necessary if the dragon encounter design had properly considered follower interactions. The permanent wait state. There's a rare glitch where telling a follower to wait causes them to wait forever, even after you tell them to follow again. The follower becomes stuck in waiting mode, standing in place indefinitely and refusing to acknowledge any commands. This permanent wait state appears to be caused by script interruptions that break the normal wait-follow command chain. When it happens, the follower is effectively lost, unless you use console commands to reset their AI state. For players on consoles without access to commands, a permanently waiting follower means losing that companion forever. The only prevention is to save before using the wait command and reload if the glitch occurs. This glitch is rare enough that many players never experience it, but common enough that it's well documented in community forums. The hidden skill trainers. Beyond the well-known follower trainers like Fendal and Ayla, there are several obscure followers who offer training in skills that many players never realize they can teach. These hidden trainers often require completing specific quest lines or achieving certain relationship thresholds before they'll offer their services. Athis, for example, is an expert one-handed weapons trainer, but most players recruit other companions members and never discover his teaching ability. The value of these hidden trainers extends beyond just the money exploit mentioned earlier. They represent opportunities to train skills that otherwise have few trainers, making them strategically valuable for certain character builds. Identifying which followers have training capabilities requires either systematically talking to every potential follower or consulting comprehensive guides that have documented these details. The inventory sorting nightmare. Follower inventories don't sort items the same way player inventories do, making it difficult to find specific items you've given them. Important quest items can get buried under dozens of random pieces of loot, and the game provides no search function for follower inventories. This sorting problem becomes worse as you use your follower as a pack mule, accumulating hundreds of items in their inventory over the course of a playthrough. Some players develop elaborate naming systems for items they give followers, prefixing important items with symbols or numbers to make them sort to the top. Others simply avoid using followers for storage, preferring to make multiple trips or use player housing instead. The inventory sorting issue represents a quality of life problem that modern games have solved, but Skyrim's older interface design didn't address. The combat AI hierarchy. Followers prioritize targets based on a hidden threat assessment system that doesn't always match player priorities. A follower might ignore a dangerous mage to attack a weak melee enemy because the melee enemy is closer or dealt damage to them recently. This target priority mismatch creates situations where you're fighting different enemies than your follower, reducing coordination. The AI threat assessment apparently weighs proximity and recent damage very heavily, causing followers to chase the wrong targets frequently. Understanding this AI priority system helps explain follower behavior that otherwise seems random or stupid. They're not choosing bad targets randomly. They're following a consistent but suboptimal priority algorithm. Players who understand this can manipulate follower targeting by damaging priority targets, making them more threatening in the AI's assessment. The married life quirks. Married followers have unique idle behaviors when they're at home with you. They'll cook meals, sleep on a schedule, and occasionally initiate dialogue about your relationship. However, these domestic behaviors can glitch, causing married followers to repeat the same actions continuously or get stuck in animation loops. A cooking spouse might stand at the cooking pot forever, never actually producing food. A sleeping spouse might clip through the bed and float in midair. These domestic animation glitches are mostly harmless, but they're immersion breaking and can make your home feel less cozy than intended. The marriage system was clearly designed to add life to player homes, but the implementation is buggy enough that many players find unmarried homes less distracting. The level scaling breakpoint. Most followers stop scaling at specific level breakpoints, at which point their stats become fixed. These breakpoints vary between followers, with some capping at level 25, others at 40, and the best ones at 50 or higher. Once a follower hits their cap, they stop getting stronger, meaning they become relatively weaker as you continue leveling. This scaling breakpoint creates a hidden expiration date for followers. They're useful up to a certain point, then become increasingly inadequate for high-level content. Jazago's unlimited scaling makes him uniquely valuable because he never hits this expiration. For players who want endgame followers, checking each potential companion's level cap before recruiting them is essential. Otherwise, you might invest time and equipment into a follower who will soon become obsolete. The trap damage accumulation. Followers take full damage from traps, but they don't get temporary immunity after being hit like players do. This means a follower walking through a hallway of swinging blade traps will get hit by every single blade, taking massive cumulative damage. The lack of temporary invincibility frames for followers makes trap-heavy dungeons extremely dangerous for them. Nordic ruins with spike traps, oil lamps, and swinging axes can kill or nearly kill followers before you even encounter enemies. The only protection is to go through trap hallways first, trigger everything, and then bring your follower through afterward. This protective behavior treats followers like children who need to be protected from environmental hazards, which is thematically odd, given they're supposed to be experienced warriors and adventurers. The equipment repair costs. When followers' equipment gets damaged through regular use, you need to repair it at a grindstone or workbench, just like your own gear. However, follower equipment degrades faster than player equipment because followers generally take more hits in combat. This creates an ongoing maintenance cost that many players don't anticipate. If you've given your follower expensive enchanted armor, the cost of keeping that armor repaired can add up significantly over a long playthrough. Some players avoid this problem by giving followers equipment that doesn't need repairs, like the various pieces of armor that have infinite durability through bugs or exploits. Others simply accept the repair cost as part of the follower maintenance burden, checking their companion's equipment condition after major battles. The voice type limitations. Each follower is assigned a voice type from Skyrim's limited pool of voice actors and scripts. This voice type determines not just how they sound, but what dialogue lines they have access to. Two followers with the same voice type will have nearly identical dialogue, creating an unfortunate homogenization. The voice type system means that recruiting a new follower with the same voice as your previous one feels like keeping the same companion, but with a different face. This limitation reveals the budgetary constraints Bethesda worked under when creating Skyrim. Voice acting is expensive, and giving every follower a unique voice was apparently not feasible. The solution was to reuse voice actors and dialogue extensively, which saves money but reduces character distinctiveness. Players who value follower personality learn to check voice types and avoid recruiting multiple followers with identical voices. The sneak modifier inheritance. Followers benefit from the player's sneak bonuses in a limited way. When you're sneaking successfully and have high sneak skill, followers receive a small bonus to their own sneak attempts. However, this bonus is much smaller than the player's actual sneak effectiveness, meaning followers will still be detected when you wouldn't be. The sneak modifier inheritance creates false confidence. You think you're sneaking well and your followers should be too, but they're operating with significantly worse stealth than you have. This discrepancy is why even followers described as excellent at stealth will still break your cover in situations where you'd be fine alone. Understanding that followers only get partial benefit from your sneak investment helps set realistic expectations for stealth gameplay with companions. The essential death loophole. Essential followers can't be killed by enemies in normal combat, but environmental hazards function differently in Skyrim's code. Falling from extreme heights, drowning, or certain environmental traps can sometimes bypass essential status protections, though this behavior is inconsistent. Some players have reported essential followers dying from falls or drowning that exceeded certain damage thresholds, while others find their essential followers survive the same situations. This inconsistency could stem from how different types of damage are calculated, or it might vary between different versions of the game or with certain mods installed. The safest assumption is that while essential status provides strong protection against enemy damage, environmental hazards should still be treated as potentially dangerous. Whether this represents an intentional design decision or a bug in how essential status is coded remains unclear. But careful players who value follower survival watch for environmental hazards regardless of essential status. The combat revive mechanic. When non-essential followers get incapacitated in combat, they'll kneel and slowly regenerate health. During this time, they're vulnerable, but usually ignored by enemies who prefer to target the player. If you can keep enemies off your fallen follower long enough, they'll revive and rejoin the fight. However, any damage they take while incapacitated can kill them permanently. This revive mechanic creates tense moments where you're trying to protect your downed companion while still fighting. The mechanic works well when you're aware of it, but many players don't realize their follower can be killed while incapacitated and lose companions to attacks they could have prevented. The combat revive system would benefit from clearer visual indicators of when followers are in critical danger versus when they're safely regenerating. The quest dialogue log. When followers are involved in active quests, they sometimes lose the ability to be traded with or commanded until the quest completes. This quest dialogue log is frustrating because it happens without warning and can last for entire quest chains. Your follower becomes essentially non-interactive, following you but refusing all commands. The quest dialogue lock exists to prevent players from breaking quest scripts by dismissing followers at critical moments. However, the implementation is overly broad, locking followers even during quest segments where dismissing them wouldn't cause problems. The result is periods where your follower is effectively a mindless drone, unable to be interacted with beyond their basic following behavior. These periods can last hours of gameplay time, making the follower feel like an NPC follower during quest, rather than your chosen companion. The skill use frequency. Followers use their skills at different frequencies based on hidden cooldown timers. A follower with healing magic might use it immediately when damaged, or might wait for a cooldown period even when they need healing. These cooldown timers vary between different skills and different followers. A follower with powerful destruction spells might only cast them occasionally, despite having the magicka to spam them. The skill use frequency limitations prevent followers from being too overpowered by constantly using their best abilities. However, these limitations also make followers less effective than they could be. From a game balance perspective, the cooldowns make sense. From a player experience perspective, watching your follower fail to heal themselves when they clearly have the ability to do so is frustrating. The cooldown timers are invisible, so you can't tell whether your follower is choosing not to use a skill or is prevented by cooldown. The mount speed scaling. When followers ride horses, their mount speed scales with their own movement speed stats, not the horse's natural speed. This creates situations where two followers on identical horses will travel at different speeds. A follower with high movement speed might keep up with your horse, while a slow follower on the same quality horse falls behind. This mount speed scaling seems illogical, since horses should determine travel speed, not the rider's personal movement stats. However, the game treats follower-mounted speed as a combination of mount and rider, creating this counterintuitive outcome. For players who care about mounted travel coordination, this means choosing followers with naturally high movement speed if you want them to keep up while riding. Heavy armor followers with low movement speed will lag behind even when mounted. The inventory interface. Slowdown. As followers accumulate items in their inventory, the interface for accessing their inventory becomes increasingly slow and laggy. This performance degradation is particularly noticeable on older systems or consoles with limited memory. A follower carrying hundreds of items might take several seconds just to open their inventory screen, and navigating through that inventory to find specific items becomes tedious. The inventory interface slowdown creates a practical limit on how much you can actually use followers for storage before the interface becomes unusable. Players who push past this limit by giving followers truly massive inventories can experience game crashes or severe lag. The technical limitation encourages using player housing for long-term storage, rather than treating followers as infinite item containers, even though the carry weight exploit suggests otherwise.